Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about Mary or the Birth of Frankenstein by Anne Eekhout. Mary or the Birth of Frankenstein is historical fiction which follows the young Mary Shelley through two different timelines. Firstly, we meet her in 1816 during her stay in Geneva with her husband Percy Shelley, her stepsister Claire, John Polidori and of course Lord Byron, during which infamously Lord Byron sets the writers there the task to write a ghost story, which we know would eventually lead to Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. In this timeline, we see Mary suffering with the grief of the loss of her daughter, while at the same time taking care of her baby son. We see her strained relationship with her stepsister Claire and her husband Percy in the wake of their affair. We see a version of Mary Shelley who is struggling to untangle all of these different threads of thought in her mind, coming to terms with her life and bringing everything together in order to sit down and write. The second timeline flashes back to the summer of 1812, when Mary was sent by her father, William Godwin, to one of his friends' families in Dundee in order to help heal a skin condition, staying at the home of the Baxter family. And this timeline particularly follows her friendship with Isabella Baxter, the middle daughter, which this book in turn reimagines as something that was maybe a little bit more than friendship. Thusly, my real issue with this book, because if you are wondering what these two narratives, what these two timelines have to do with each other aside from the connecting thread of Mary Shelley, you might be waiting a while. I don't know what to tell you. I waded through 350 pages of this book and couldn't come to a conclusion as to why these two stories were being told simultaneously. To me, these are two very separate stories, two separate books being squished together for no reason. They don't really have anything to do with each other thematically. To start with, the 1812 narrative is much more prominent than the 1816 one, which is probably going to be quite disappointing to Frankenstein fans who may be coming to this book thinking that this is going to be like the discussion on the origins of Mary Shelley's writing of Frankenstein, is maybe going to give some insight into her writing, because it really doesn't. Her writing of Frankenstein barely comes up in this book, which kind of seems like a little bit of misadvertising considering the title. This book is about Frankenstein in name only. You could really take the 1816 chapters out and you wouldn't really lose anything, which is a shame because those 1816 chapters are far more interesting and far more dynamically told. Reading this, reflecting on this, it felt like Anne Eekhout just really wanted to write what is essentially fan fiction about Isabella Baxter and Mary Shelley, but probably knew that without connecting it to Frankenstein, then it probably wasn't going to generate much interest. In fact, I don't even know if it would have been published. Yeah, to me it just feels like false advertising. I don't want to completely bash this book, even though I didn't have the best time with it, because there are good things about it. I do think that she is a skilled writer. There was some early discussions on grief and motherhood that I thought were compelling at the beginning, and to be honest, I wish had been explored in a little bit more depth and detail, especially because it would help really link up the two timelines. We see in the 1812 timeline how both Isabella and Mary are grieving their mothers, Isabella having recently lost her mother, Mary having never known her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, because she died a few days after her birth. And then in the 1816 chapters, we're seeing Mary Shelley dealing with her own grief and her own struggles with the concept of motherhood, having lost her first child. And I think there are some interesting concepts there that could have been explored more, especially knowing that Frankenstein is a book that is about parenthood and about grief. But those themes are never actually taken as far as you would want them to. Like for me, it feels like I'm very much having to extrapolate that and put it onto the book to make it make sense. For me, it was an interesting thought process of how far do you need an author to actually hold your hand and tell you this is the theme, this is the overarching theme, how much an author should just leave you be to figure it out for yourself. Like, where is that line? At what point is it that the author has just dangled some concepts in front of you and then just never actually followed through with them? To me, it feels like the latter. I really like how the 1812 chapters are told in first person, whereas the 1816 are told in third person. It really adds a sense of detachment to Mary Shelley. In the 1816 chapters, it kind of feels like she's disassociating from the narrative as a result of her bereavement. She doesn't have as much control. Things are just happening to her rather than her taking action herself. I also think that Anne Eekhout is clearly very skilled in writing in a Gothic style. She knows the tropes, she uses some of them well, and her language and her writing can be lovely at times. However, for me, these Scotland chapters, which constitute, you know, like 2/3 to 3/4 of the book, really let it down for me. Not because of historical accuracy. I think exploring Isabella Baxter and Mary Shelley's relationship is an interesting concept, but because we're kind of vacillating between two extremes of these chapters either being really slow-paced and dull or just completely ridiculous, and indulging in some of the historical fiction tropes that I really hate. There are certain things in historical fiction that can really make me just go ick. Female characters being like, ew, corsets. Yeah, there is a scene of that in here where they're like, oh my god, I can't believe that we ever wear corsets. Eye rolling at other girls in the narrative because, ew, those silly girls. Thank god I'm not like them. We have a lot of that when it comes to Mary's relationship with Claire. And then the most egregious of them all, the one that you know that I hate, which is making a female character witchy because you don't know how else to make them dynamic and interesting characters and you want to show that they are different, so let's just make them witchy. To me, that is just a laziness that pervades so much historical fiction. Mary Shelley is inherently interesting to us because we know that she wrote Frankenstein, which therefore leaves the conundrum of how do you make Isabella Baxter interesting? Well, Anne Eekhout's answer is to make her a little bit witchy, or is she? Because, you know, how else can you depict two women getting on with each other and finding each other interesting? And so yeah, Isabella Baxter is depicted as being like a little bit witchy, a little bit in tune to the spirits of Scotland. And it's very wishy-washy. It's kind of like, is she not? Is it just an overactive imagination on the part of Mary and Isabella? For some reason, this is intriguing to Mary Shelley. Probably because, aside from the fact that they share deceased mothers, there's really not much else to Isabella as a character. There's no intrigue to her to speak of, so let's just rely on this lazy trope. Does this witchiness go anywhere? Not really. Does it add anything to the story? Does it illuminate anything in the 1816 narrative? No, not really. It is just filler. It is a way to fill 350 pages and to add to the atmosphere and make it a little bit more gothic and spooky, but I don't feel like it adds anything. And then to add insult to injury, when you do have characters that we know a lot about, you know, historic figures like Percy Shelley, like Lord Byron, of which, you know, there is a lot out there to kind of make up a personality, and Eekhout then adds barely any characterization to these figures, as if prior knowledge about these figures should be all we need, enough at least to fill in the gaps that the author has left. And once again, it just feels lazy. It feels like cutting corners. Like the author is thinking, I don't need to bother creating dynamic characters because the atmosphere and the spookiness of this book will just pull the reader through. Unfortunately, I'm a characters and relationships kind of gal, so I needed it. I'm sorry. Honestly, by the end of this book, I actually just felt a bit resentful to have to read it. I mean, you don't have to read anything. I probably should have DNF'd it, but I felt like I was so far through it that I might as well finish it. And yeah, I felt resentful. I felt angry that this book was taking me away from so many other things that I could read instead. And yet, I don't deny that Anne Eekhout is a really fantastic author. Her works are slowly but surely being translated into English. I'd be very interested to see what else is in her backlist. This just for me felt very flat, which is a shame because I was really anticipating it. I just wish she hadn't tried to stamp Mary Shelley and Frankenstein onto this story, which for the most part isn't really anything to do with her, and otherwise just feels like run-of-the-mill gothic historical fiction, which flirts with the idea of having a queer love story for Mary Shelley, but ultimately doesn't do anything with it. It's a shame because there are so many buzzwords in here. I feel like if I described this to people and I said, you know, it's about Mary Shelley, it's about Frankenstein, it's gothic, it's witchy, it has sapphic elements to it, I know who that would appeal to. And I just can't help but feel like those people would pick it up and feel a bit disappointed in it because it just doesn't deliver properly on any of those things. And I'm sad to say it because I really wanted to like this. But yeah, that was my first kind of sadder read of 2024. Definitely though, the cover design, can't fault it. This is absolutely going to make it onto my most beautiful books of 2024. I'd like to see what beats this out, but unfortunately just didn't deliver as a story for me. So there we go, those are all of my thoughts about Mary or the Birth of Frankenstein by Anne Eekhout. Please let me know if you've read this book. I feel like this has been quite a Marmite book from the reviews that I have read, so I'd be very interested to know, did you love this, did you hate it, or are you just a little bit ambivalent towards it? Have I made you more or less likely to want to pick it up? Because I'm sure there are many things that I've said in this that would actually appeal to people. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.